As we move to our next panel discussion, I must ponder on the point that ESG principles serve as a potent enabler for enhancing business efficiencies across diverse sectors. By integrating ESG considerations into corporate strategies, businesses can streamline operations, mitigate risk, and optimize resource allocation. A robust ESG proposition is linked to value creation through avenues such as driving top-line growth, implementing costs reduction, navigating regulatory and legal interventions, uplifting productivity, and optimizing investment and assets. Ladies and gentlemen, before we jumpstart into the next discussion, please give me a moment to introduce our panelists. We have Ms. Preet Kahlon, Head Process Excellence, Procurement and Supply Chain, Cairn Oil and Gas. We have Ms. Shilpashree Muniswamappa, Director, ESG and Communications, Colgate-Palmolive India Limited. We have Mr. Surya Prakash Valluri, Chief Sustainability Officer, Grasim Industries. Mr. Anil Kumar Makkar, Group Chief Sustainability Officer and Director, Manufacturing JK Tires. We have Ms. Ambalika Gupta, Vice President, Sustainability, Snowcap. And to moderate this session, let's welcome Mr. Hitesh Sethi, Senior Director, Analytics and Consultant at Dun & Bradstreet, India. Let's have all our esteemed panelists and our anchor on stage, please. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I can see a lot of diversity on this panel, and I'm really looking forward to listening a lot from all of you. Thank you very much. Hitesh, over to you. Thank you.
So, it's interesting actually. 5 years back, maybe if you would have done an ESG event, a handful of you would have been here. The whole transformation is very unique from sustainability to now looking at ESG and sustainability. We will cover the lens, I think, from a business efficiency perspective. Each of the panelists have had rich experience. I think one of the good things about ESG is that we are all business people who've grown into sustainability and now are driving these initiatives within the firms. So the first big question is that does it really add to efficiencies, right? Is there any cost which gets gained? Are we doing it because this is the right way to do, and over the long run, it will lead to more efficient business models. I think first we'll explore through their experiences within the diverse sectors. And for example, we have Grasim, which is looking at multiple businesses. JK Tires, where the JK Group actually is in multiple businesses, but his experience has been on the tire side. Colgate-Palmolive, we've Cairn Oil and Gas, and Snowcap, which is the enabler. So I think that's the first track. We'll move on to the second piece where we'll focus on supply chain. We'll look at how difficult or challenging that journey has been, whether it's ongoing, or we've achieved a certain criticality there. And then we'll say, okay, we're doing ESG, how it is benefiting us overall. My customer, is it resonating positively there from a communication perspective, from a belonging perspective, both internal and external stakeholders. So these are the three buckets. Let me just jump right in, Surya, to you. From your lens, from the industry, the various businesses, how has been this journey for you? Where are you today?
Yeah, very good morning. First of all, thank you for having me here. Yeah, you're right. We are a very diversified company. This is the flagship company of the Aditya Birla Group. We are into pulp and fiber, where the materialities are completely different. And then we are into chlor-alkali, completely different materiality issues. And then we are now into paints, the totally different challenges over there. And then textiles, then you have B2B, and of course, cement, even though it is not the flagship, it's not part of the standalone company, but the Grasim is the largest shareholder in Ultratech Cement. So it's a very energy guzzling, but the different materialities and different challenges for each of these businesses. The one of the point that you asked is most of these professionals coming into ESG, your introduction is very impressive. We are all coming from different backgrounds, or probably I'm from large chunk of my career is in operations, in the manufacturing. From there, I moved into the ESG. I can really see what is the operational challenges the group faces and the teams faces on the ground, and what is the challenges that we have to deliver when with respect to the regulatory point of view, with respect to your stakeholders' expectations point of view. And then you also have the pressure of delivering your, top line, bottom line, etc., along with your sustainability deliverables. So it's a very multidimensional, and this kind of diverse backgrounds can definitely add value to that. That's what I realize. If you bring in a fresh, only knowledge about ESG alone, probably they will kind of find it a little difficult in terms of convincing, because in my opinion, sustainability is more of a broad consensus, and bringing in people's thinking and aligning the thinking towards moving in the right direction. So that's where I think that will help. So the biggest challenge that I face as a sustainability head of Grasim industry is how I can actually merge these all materiality issues and take care of those materiality issues of each of these SBU. But at the same time, at a Grasim level, what is the deliverables that we need to do as part of our ESG commitment? That's the biggest challenge. And then the allocation of the resources for each of this is the subsequent step that I face challenges day in, day out.
Yeah, and just if I could ask you a follow-up on that, it takes a village to drive this, right? So when you look at internal stakeholders, functions, criticality, external stakeholders, whom do you think are the most critical? And just following up, because I think many of us are starting this journey, we may have complex structures, and that prioritization will help.
All of them are equally important. You can't really single out, but you can't really, clap without any of these hands putting together. Internal stakeholders are as important as external stakeholders. The reason being, they are the one who is actually going to go through the pain or go through the implementation phase of it, and they are the one who is actually going to run the show, right? The external stakeholders always have a different viewpoint. They always come first with a suspicious eye and then start looking into whether it is really correct or not. And then they start buying in. It takes a lot of time for you. So convincing and the communication and the narration is very important as a challenge for the external stakeholders. And then, of course, you have your own set of management, the directors and the other people who are responsible for driving. For them, the biggest headache is it's not only about one angle of the business of the sustainability, but for them, everything there has to level playing field for them. So making them understand that, yes, while that is also going there, we can drive sustainability along with the business performance. That is the
sure.
So yeah. each of them are equivalently challenging.
Right. No, I think two important points you made. One is that we come from an operation background, so we can understand what will it take, evaluate also the benefits with that lens. The second is the whole change management, which has to be driven, not just with our internal stakeholders, top leadership. Everybody has a different view. So a different perspective. I'll come to you, Preet. I think oil and gas is one industry where I think a large part of the sustainability initiative is driving against the usage of energy, right? And it is a segment where the double materiality principle is working, right? It's not just, how you are changing the environment, but how the environment is changing and therefore forcing you to adapt. So how you've been taking part in this journey, looking at business efficiency, ESG internally, what have been your challenges?
First of all, I'm very thankful to Dun & Bradstreet for organizing this session, and which allows us to exchange thoughts. Now, ESG is a very, very important topic, which is flavor of the day, but it is something which can benefit from thoughts from diverse sector, diverse professionals. Like at the time of introduction, they said, they're looking forward to feedback from this panel, because this panel is a very diverse panel. So there's one level of diversity, which is gender diversity. We are equally, matched. But then there's a whole lot of diversity of the backgrounds that we are coming from, the thoughts that we are bringing to the table, the sectors that we represent, and the functions that we represent. Now, coming to your question, which is talking about oil and gas. So I'm a part of Cairn Oil and Gas, which is overall a part of Vedanta Limited. So we have, like you said, double materiality. We are in metals and mining. Overall, we are reporting from a metals and mining's perspective. We are also in oil and gas space. So different material concerns emerging from these two entities. From a sustainability reporting, sometimes we have to report in the Vedanta framework as well as the material aspects from Cairn Oil and Gas. Considering the sector that I am in, Cairn Oil and Gas, the oil and gas sector itself, our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions itself are very high. Leave alone, from a materiality aspect, our scope 3 emissions are very low. But from an ESG transformation perspective, what are the changes which are being brought on? Like we report into the overarching Vedanta philosophy, which is about transforming. So transforming the planet, transforming the workplace, and transforming community. In terms of transforming the planet, what are the kind of initiatives that we are looking at? While we cannot change the sector in which we operate, but we can enhance the efficiencies that we can bring in the way we are working. One aspect could be reducing gas flaring. Wherever you're producing oil and gas, there is always something required as a technical flaring, which is a safety requirement. But beyond that, if there is any additional flaring going on, how do I reduce the flaring to reduce the environmental impact? Second is, if I have some disparate fields, the satellite fields which are very spread out, where it is very difficult to lay a pipeline to get the gas to my gas plant, then how do I optimize gas capture from there using some kind of mobile technologies and find some customers who are willing to offtake the gas from those places? So there's a thought behind, how do I mitigate my environmental impacts by bringing efficiency to the entire way in which I'm working. A lot of our fields, which is Barmer field, is in a water deficit region. How I've taken a goal of net water positivity. How do I ensure that net water positivity? How do I ensure that while I'm executing my projects, that I'm not taking water which is available for the communities and divert it to my cause? Have I identified an alternate water source, maybe a saline aquifer, which I'm utilizing, instead of taking water from the communities? Then again, in terms of governance and social structure, how am I giving, how am I servicing the communities around me? From an ESG initiative, linking net water positivity to, restoring water structures like nadis, which are there in Rajasthan, is another initiative that we have taken, So these are some of the aspects. I think the ultimate aim is, you have set very stringent goals for yourselves. How do you ensure that all your management actions are aligned to your goals? They are included in the thought process. They're included in the decision making. So that's the aspect through which we can drive the ESG initiatives. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Very important points. I think this whole complexity about group structure, being one step down subsidiaries and how to align, I think that is very critical. The second piece is that earlier, from a waste perspective, what was okay is not okay anymore, right? And if we need to change that, we need to be adaptable. The business model has to change. Saying that can I get small buyers or can I have a mechanism through which I can reduce gas flaring and that gas can be consumed, right? The other third part she spoke about was community, right? The community at large. How am I taking care of it? How I'm looking at water? How am I looking at livelihood? I think these are important dimensions. And why is this important? Because when they make the change, their supply chain has to evolve. The supply chain has to support. The customers downstream have to adopt. And sometimes that leads to opportunities. Sometimes it leads to cost. Now, in that context, another interesting example, I'll come to you, Anil, from JK Tyre's perspective, multiple manufacturing units, multiple locations, multiple countries. One is I have to improve efficiencies, I have to look at sustainability. And the other part is this whole, I would say, cost of compliance, right? Each market has their own unique way of looking at ESG. How do we bring that together? How are you addressing that challenge?
Good morning. Yeah. Thank you. Hitesh, sometime ESG as a buzzword is just been 5 to 6 years old. A lot of smoke around this subject has come up. But I think this whole thing is being driven from the point of view of necessity. I'll give a very small example, continuing on the point what Sunil brought in. See, we had our mother plant in a place, very small place, probably not even known on the map of the country, is Kankaroli. And this plant was set up in 1976. The only water source for that plant was the lake, which is Asia's largest lake. In 2003, 4, 5, the huge drought in Rajasthan, and that lake was like a flatbed. We used to play cricket in that particular. I took over charge of that plant in 2006. I was heading that location, and there was no water. Our total need of water was around 1500 to 1800 KL per day, and we used to ferry the water from by bullock carts, paying enormous amount, not for water but for the transportation. That was the kind of condition which forced us to think that if you are located in a place where water is not there, how do you survive? And I think 2007 was the first time when we started thinking about nature and environment and planet and water. Positivity and surplus is a much secondary thought. But the necessity of surviving created the awareness about sustainability. I'm very proud to say that we started our journey of sustainability in 2007 for water security, to be more precisely focused on water. Today, that plant is a global benchmark. We use zero water for process, only use water for drinking and domestic purposes. Now, while we were doing that, we realized that if less water you have to handle, you handle less power. When you handle less power, your carbon footprint is lower. So after finishing that journey for around 3 years, we took over our first carbon footprinting way back in 2013, while it was still not known. And mind you, tire industry, as it is not a very big emitter. If you look at the top 13, 14 sectors which have been now made mandated for getting into the regulation, tire industry still doesn't appear there. But it is not about compliance. It is not about regulation. I think the concept as a company we have always focused on is going beyond compliance. Our total mission for the organization has been be a green trusted mobility partner. So that is how you start thinking little differently and out of the box. See, the moment you start thinking about environment and ROI, I think you confuse both the words very, very strongly. ROI has to be seen little bit in longer term. If you say that today you invest and tomorrow you should be able to reap that benefit, no, it doesn't happen like that. You have to start thinking that tomorrow if there is no water, there is no power, there is no carbon, there is no earth, will your business really survive? What is the larger business risk? And I think that's where a lot of promoters, lot of family-driven organizations have started thinking. See, reporting and compliance in India was at a very, very delayed stage. If you look at the first GRI module which came up was somewhere in 1996 or 1997. The ISO 14001 came up in 1992. In India, we were all working about NVGs or the business guidelines. The first BRSR reporting, which really made the business responsible about sustainability, was only last year, 22-23. Or even if I say top 250 companies in the country, it was 21-22. So, compliance is not really a thought one should drive the sustainability on, and that's not how we have looked at it. And to continue this subject which Sunil started, from shop floor to top floor, we as professionals who have moved from operations, I've been a hardcore manufacturing person for so many years of my professional career. The bridge between the shop floor and top floor is the role which we need to play. To communicate as to what exactly is the need of people at the ground level, not only in terms of sustainability or not in terms of only environment, but in terms of societal needs, in terms of educational needs, in terms of health and safety, complete environment management, and truly implementing the SA 8000, which is the contention of the whole societal information or societal transformation. So those are the issues which drive you towards it. If you keep counting the greens, no, it will not work out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
I just wanted to add one. is always very close to me, and I always keep on contesting about it. ROI is not just only numbers. When you are putting up the ROI, the assumptions that are going into the ROI are the most critical ones to understand. If you are presenting a project or some investment to some of those people who don't understand those assumptions and only purely go by numbers, I don't think so you will ever win the battle. So it's always important to know what is those assumptions. Just one example. Suppose you are not going to invest in sustainability and you are into certain markets where sustainability is still not the mandated one. You're good to go. You are very happy right now. You're doing fantastic. Your top line, bottom line increasing day in, day out. But the moment you start having some kind of a competition creeping into your own market, then you start looking for outside market, right? The moment you start outside market, you are not in the journey of meeting those requirements in the outside market. Then what will you do? Those are the assumptions.
Right.
Those assumptions, if they never come into discussions, all these ROI discussions are very futile.
Yeah. I think the question is that in the long term, will we have enough resources? Will the firm survive? And is my business model looking at all these variabilities, externalities, when I'm actually just doing a financial assessment, right? So coming to you, from Colgate perspective, one of the challenges which, if you could bring in is I've always feel that multinational companies, I have guidelines, Indian guidelines, which I need to comply with. I have global frameworks, which I have to comply with. And, and many of the suppliers we talk to, I think, we are waiting for guidance from our global team on how do I do the materiality assessment, right? And a lot of energy and effort gets wasted. How you address that challenge, if we could just specifically spend some time on that.
Yeah, thank you, Hitesh, and thanks to DNB for bringing all of us together. I'll just start with a little bit of the journey. I'm sure a couple of them are ops leads, have been in hardcore operations people. I'm not sure about your journey. You've also been in procurement. Okay, totally different, right? I started off as a COPCOM professional, that's corporate communications. Then CSR got added to my portfolio, and then sustainability or ESG. So from a brand lens, I think that's where you bring in a different perspective. And I'm glad today to be representing a brand that's the most penetrated brand in the country. So Colgate is the most penetrated brand in the country, the one that would have reached the largest households in this country. So our responsibility is also that much fold higher, actually. Coming to your question, we somewhere got a little lucky because there are only 2 Colgate entities in the world that are listed. One is in the US, the other one is in India. So a lot of times it's easier to say for us, you know what, this is what the Indian guidelines say, so we need to fix with this, we need to. That said, most of the thinking comes in from the parent company itself, I think, because what you do here in India ground up is fine, but the vision to be able to invest on that comes in from global perspective. And I'll pick up just probably one of the topics. Say, for example, we were the first ones to come up with recyclable tubes for toothpaste. Market leader, global leader in the subject, but we never kept it to ourselves, kept it, opened it up, open source. So a lot of other companies were also able to replicate and learn from us. I think as a leader, that's what is also your responsibility. Like I said, hire because you're in higher homes. What you do can also set benchmarks. A lot of them spoke about, I think now with the ESG piece, a lot of them spoke about water being one of the topics they have picked up around their plans, which we've also started doing because we've realized that all of us are working towards net zero. All of us are saying true waste plants. All of us are saying water neutrality in our factories. But is your immediate neighborhood also getting benefited? Or is that learning that you have going down to your vendors, supplier partners? Are you able to teach them what is to be done? I think we do that. But I also want to pick up on another topic that we as a company are very passionate about, which is waste management, right? We talk about true waste at our factories, but what happens to things outside? So we have programs that we do with people, general public as well, across various states on segregation of waste. We do collection of waste, plastic and beyond, and ensure that it goes into the right places and not into landfills, because that itself, I think, is a lot of work that India needs. Of course, India does recycling better than a lot of other countries, but we have a long way to go because our population is of that size. And the fact that, just if I were to say about 4 billion toothpaste tubes every year, and say about 2 billion toothbrushes every year, is a lot, even though they may be small in size. I think so. And I think that's where we come as leaders, or, and sometimes if you set the trend, then the rest of them will have to follow, right? We go with recyclable, ensure that our supply chain is able to do and deliver, then the rest of them in the market will also fall in place. So you kind of move towards a direction that is good. And we do a lot of programs, and most of our programs are children oriented, both on, say, oral health and, whether it's on waste management. We do a lot of programs in school so that we start instilling them in the right place, the whole sustainability grain. But also there's one more thing, I don't know, I think the last panel touched about a little on saying that because you're consumer led, so does your consumer also define, because these days everybody says vegan, the Flipkart guy was here, right? So I'm sure, but how many people ultimately buy green products sustainably? It's not about buying once and forgetting it, right? Somebody should be ready to invest into that month on month. You don't see that. And I don't know if you've read, but there's a Say Do Gap report that's there globally. It's available in every country. When you do surveys, consumers say, I'm ready to pay this premium to buy something, but when they do it, it's not. There's a huge gap, and India, I think, is about almost 50-60% gap between what people say and what they actually buy in terms of green products. So, but that's the challenge for corporates. What you need to do is, you still should ensure, and we've done that with our recyclable tubes, would not have come easy because when you start the technology, but we absorbed the costs and did not pass it on to the consumer. So it's not necessary that sustainable products need to be costlier. It's for us to, ensure that, and that's the only way you kind of can push this, thought in your consumer as well. So I think that's what I said. And all of us here are leaders in our respective sectors. So I'm sure all that we are doing is actually generating a lot of value for the industries we actually belong to, whether it's FMCG, whether it's oil and gas, or the tire industry. So.
Yeah, no, and I've always struggled with this dichotomy, right? As a society, we recycle, reuse, and we've been doing it for ages, right? Exactly. I think, waste management is one area where there is a
our
chain.
moms are the best at it.
Yes, absolutely. And somewhere, at the firm level, we didn't really, and now we are moving in that direction. I think the adaptation is a function of how you position the product, how you price it eventually. And that's the gap we'll have to address. Now, across all of this, data is the key, right? When we spoke about decision making, we said, okay, how do we quantify all of this together, bring it into a dashboard, and bring it to the relevant stakeholders for decision making. So you've been doing that as part of Snowcap, supporting this journey, and you would have looked at different industries, different challenges. Any views on how technology and integrating data is driving business efficiencies?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the question, Hitesh. Few notes before I start. Number one, if any one of us really has enjoyed a campfire growing up, the carbon from that campfire is still lingering around. So all of us have been part of that problem right from the day we were born or we've been growing up. Right, it stays in the atmosphere for 100 years. So basically, the chula rotis of your nani, dadi, it's still part of the game, like it or not. You are still living with it. And as I take this position to represent and talk about data, I must confess, none of the industry or companies has it figured out. It's interesting, while everybody really speaks about how far they have come, we do not really hear much about the challenges they have to overcome. That's where the learning basically sits in. Your tier 1 suppliers, they were the trickiest to start with. Imagine going down to tier 2, tier 3, expanding the scope of influence, getting the right, verifiable data, like those words, verifiable data. But do you really need a verifiable data to at least make a start is the question, right? And can you really start with an estimation of it? then work towards an approximation of it, and then let's talk about verification, because now you want to make claims. So we've been looking at data, and none of the industry leaders, for that matter, have it figured out. The challenges still remain. While it is very interesting that the corporate offices or global headquarters go ahead, make a commitment, the regional offices and more so over the suppliers are clueless, because they were never part of this brainstorming towards commitment. Right? It just happens. It happens on the go. Some conference, some event, business leaders will do this. No, but we haven't really thought through how will we push it down in our supply chain. Because that's the whole idea. You will always, it's easiest to control your scope of influence, scope 1, 2, but how do you influence your suppliers over a period of time? And do you penalize them? Is that a right approach? Because then you are just blacklisting and outcasting, and you are not part of actually solving the problem. So how do you build that awareness? How do you do that capacity? Can you work with an estimation of the data? Can you incentivize them to kind of, so does your supplier engagement strategy says that, okay, we have this rough estimated data for you right now, and you can work with global benchmarks or generic data. There are different methods of calculation, so we work with that. But then over a period, can I really invest in your green energy transition, and can I secure this price for a period of 5 years? That's what my supplier engagement strategy needs to be all about. Now, it's interesting because supply chain managers and procurement guys can only do so much. Their first, KRA is like best quality, cheapest price, payback time has to be only so much, which is interesting. And that's what really business needs. But how can you enable and empower them? It cannot be like an extra 5-hour learning. I mean, given a chance, none of us really wants to continuously end up reading about things. So that is where technology really comes handy, right? At Snowcap, we have a platform where we work with a lot of estimation data in case you don't have a specific data. So as long as you know the material, supplier, location, that's a good enough for a start. And we encourage starts. So, our basically tagline is from strategy to action. So yes, you've been making a lot of strategies, quarterly reviews, annual reviews. Let's talk about action now. So can we start with an estimation, given your supplier volume, material, so on and so forth? And can we start then engaging with your suppliers? And we enable all of that through platforms. So it's not just you or your supply chain manager who works with a lot of this insight. The same value is added to the supplier as well. So let's say tomorrow, even if you drop him dead and cancel him out, he still has a roadmap. He knows where the hotspot is. He knows how can I bring it down. So that was the whole idea of building Snowcap as a platform, because the gap is huge. Interestingly, there was a news article 2 or 3 days back, 200 companies rejected out of SBTi targets. And it's interesting to know the reason. Number one, they just made a commitment. They had no idea how they'll do it. And as time passes, they are getting nervous about how they're gonna, because they haven't had it figured out. Second, the litigation if they fail to meet the challenge. I never think penalizing anybody for that matter is the right way to go about it. It's a clear indication of a gap and a challenge. And the third part of it is like the lack of awareness. Scope 3 is far complex than we thought.
Yeah.
Right? It's interesting how we kind of, we cancel out scope 3 and we say, oh no, this, but that's not how any one of us will ever make any progress or be able to save the planet that way.
Yeah, no, I think, very important.
I just want to add something. Talking about scope 3, and good, Amba, you moved the subject to scope 3. We were trying to work out, see, scope 3 is not something which is like a simple calculation of a scope 1, scope 2, you know what's happening within your boundary. The moment you talk about scope 3, there is a category 12 which talks about emission in the use phase. Right. Now, in emission in use phase, I was reading a case study, and I'm sure Shilpa will support me on that. Colgate-Palmolive at one time claimed that they have a product where a person, when he uses the product in the morning, he doesn't have to wet his toothbrush. So that much amount of that millisecond of water is saved. Now, how on the earth you calculate that, and how do you calculate the carbon emission on that, is still under discussion in the case study. A similar story of the tire. When you talk about use phase, category 12, scope 3, the actual emission is coming from the burning of the fuel when the tire is on the vehicle.
Right.
Isn't it? So is it part of the vehicle's use phase 12 or is it part of the tire use phase 12? They say, no, when you develop tires with low rolling resistance and low weight tires and green tires and all that buzzwords we have been working around and investing huge amount of money into that, where does this accounting go from? I was working on a similar platform like Snowcap. There is, like Amba said, there is still a huge amount of gap which needs to be figured out by almost all the industries. And especially those abstract kind of identifications which come up are not easy to counter. But I think, again, necessity will drive us all towards that.
Yeah, any complexity which comes up. I think important points again, quick estimation, getting to know the current status, knowing where to focus. I think technology drives that, data drives that. The other challenges on scope 3 is all greenwashing, and the supplier saying that why should I publish my data to you. I think from a supplier lens, let me bring, Preet in, and from a Grasim perspective also, how are we incorporating ESG, right, in this whole process of conversation with the supplier, evaluating them, assessing risk, because all our lens has always been about financial risk, right? And like she said, that lowest cost procurement. But how is ESG changing this landscape for you from a supplier perspective?
So let me take this. From Cairn, what I can say is it has become one of the parameters for screening, initial screening, So there are questions which are baked into my pre-qualification and technical qualification parameters, which looked at things like environmental impact, what is their waste management policy, what is their waste management guideline that they're willing to do in terms of water usage. If people are operating within my plant site, what is the factors that they're willing to do? All these are being baked into a baseline questionnaire, which allows them, only if they're passing above a certain level, will they be considered. So this is being used as one of the filtration mechanism. And secondly, what is happening is, even if we have brought the person on board, we are conducting, some kind of third party checks, looking at the data emerging in public domain, because people's behavior does not vary. If somebody is showing up in National Green Tribunal databases or state pollution control databases, and they have given on paper commitment to you that they are going to, ensure a proper, waste management and disposal. These are the red flags that we are getting from outside in. Then you have these conversations with these vendors. Okay, from a governance standpoint, what I'm seeing in the data set is like you are not, you're not compliant on your GST. Are you reporting those? If you're coming, if there's a pollution report coming in, and we are having an annual assessment with them, we are asking those questions. So we have seen this data set in public domain. Tell us what actually happened and how you are managing the risk in our operations. If we are not satisfied with the data, we are asking them for the action plan. So all these things are being baked in how we are engaging with our supply chain. So over to you, sir.
So yeah, I think so one important point is that we're asking a lot of qualification questions using the screening data. The other part which Ambalika was touching was that it's when Maruti started the whole auto scene, and they said that the supply chain doesn't exist, right? The manufacturing practices don't exist, and everything was done from scratch. Maybe that dimension will also enable, from a supply chain perspective, if there's something you're doing in that direction, that will also help.
It's really very difficult task, to be very frank, especially for us with so many diversified businesses and so many diversified portfolios for each of the SBU, different set of suppliers. What we decided to do is use Pareto rule. Go first with 80% of those who are actually the contributing 80% of the volume to you. So it may be 20 or 30. Let's get with them and try and understand where do they stand. In that, then again further classify and declassify whether they are large corporations or MSMEs or SMEs. Now, large corporations, more or less, they have their own set of measurements and the boards and there is governance and their disclosures, etc. The MSMEs and the SMEs again is a challenge for us. How to you educate them and get them on board. MSMEs still they understand because they realize that the regulatory changes are actually compelling them to think about it. So it's easy to work with them. But the biggest challenge is with the SMEs. Now there again, I believe what we need certain intervention from the policymakers to make them understand about the requirement of the sustainability, the requirement of enabling them to go through this journey. And there should be some kind of an infrastructure that need to be provided for them. It could be a common infrastructure. For example, for the data. If you ask an SME to have a database and then supply the data and that data should be available for us to audit, I don't think they will invest. For him, it is more about how much of the product and how much of the productivity that drive his business than the data and other things. There, the interventions required to provide them the infrastructure whereby in a public domain they can provide the data and host the data at a very minimal cost rather than creating the infrastructure in it. So that is the way you need to tackle this business. Otherwise, we will not be having the right set of journey or right set of progress in this supply chain solution. The first thing that I did when we started this was just did this Pareto rule. In each of the business, let's have 80-20 principle. Let's see who are those 80% contributing to us. And then look at what they are doing. Then we started having a survey with them. Then we gained in-depth knowledge about what are these. Then we found a mixed bag of information. Then we realized that we need to then segregate further into what kind of cluster of industry it is and where do they stand.
So I'll totally endorse what Sir said, applying Pareto's rule and looking at where, material impacts are coming from, especially in supply chain. Even if you look at BRSR reporting, it's looking at it's looking at, 75% of the spend kind of this thing, value chain partners. And that's where it expects us to provide reasonable assurance. So none of us, can master our supply chain overnight. It will have to be a prolonged, stepwise journey, starting from your critical suppliers, your high-value spend suppliers. Some of your suppliers may not be that critical, may not be that high value, but it could be critical from the kind of impact, So those are the aspects that we need to classify, decide which is our considered set, and drill down there at first, and then go and deepen those areas. So.
Yeah, I think the important point you made is the concerted effort which is required, not just from our end, but from the top down, because there is a burden to compliance, and the other part which is very important is that the suppliers don't know how, and when we drove earlier productivity and efficiency improvement, we actually worked with them, right? We had teams which guided them. I think the ESG journey also has to work in that same manner. If we just sit, as professionals and expect them to comply on their own, that may not happen at all. I think that's the key part. So technology can enable you, can bring in visibility, can bring in the data, but eventually for the supplier, the supplier, which is a small business, which is a family-owned business, you would say, okay, right, I'll run it for 10 years. After that, my son is not interested, I'll shut it down. That is easier for him to decide than to actually do all of these changes, and look at different fuel types, look at renewable energy, invest in technology, so upskill manpower, have standards where, the shop floor. And I've seen the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, yeah.
Just to add on to that, one has to understand in which region and geography you operate, right? There is a significant gap with the knowledge and the capability, right? What you as a business need between your supplier and the gap to fill in that. So your supply chain managers being aware of the space, understanding data points. First, they need training. It becomes an overwhelming work for that. And there are systems out there. And that is why even at Snowcap, we have a platform and a managed service where we take this role because we understand there is a significant gap. There's a significant learning that needs to happen, which can happen parallelly while we try and address and bridge that. So managed service is a key offering of what we are building and doing because we've been on the ground. I'm a certified auditor myself and I know the challenge. The books will always be perfect, but that's not the idea.
Right.
That's not the objective of what we are doing. So the managed service is a key place. And in the panel before, there was a return of investment discussion, ROI. that's the investment you make. It will have a financial aspect to it, and so it will have a time-bound aspect to it, right? What is the time and platform cost or managed service cost that you invest in year one, and what is the amount of risk it will reduce in your year 2, year 3, and year 4?
Yeah,
Right.
sure.
So that's a different matrix to look at.
Yeah, and from a small guy's perspective, the question always is, why should I make that investment? And I think the other part of it is that you should make that investment. You are the larger player. So again, I'll get you in. There's one more dimension which we'll cover. After your input, that is on this whole. Perception, I think Shilpa covered that when she said that people are not buying, it's a green product, it's available. Many times that green product could be a substitute for me, right? In oil and gas, if I'm saying a clean, efficient fuel, renewable energy or green hydrogen now becomes a substitute. You were talking about innovation on the product side and saying that where does it lie? In Grasim, for example, I'm building up something which is green cement, which is blended cement. But is there really adaptation? So this is the other side of the lens, right? I may drive product innovation, but is it acceptable to the customer, and is the customer willing to pay value for it? So what is your view? I think that thing, and after that we can open it up for some brief questions. And
Good, you brought this point up. I was coming to that. See, we discussed about supply chain. And there are two pieces to this. One is the current supply chain, current product line which you are making. See, talking specifically about even automobiles or tires specifically, we have over 100 plus raw materials. Most of them are petrochemical based. So there is a race globally to convert your petro-based material to green or plant-based material. Now the question is, in the reference to the circular economy, where we talk about end-of-life tires being reused back into the tire, that is cradle-to-cradle concept, instead of cradle-to-grave concept. Today, technology is not available where you can use the recycled material in producing a new tire by consuming more than 6 to 7%. Globally, the best number I have seen is not more than 7%. So it's going to take, we had recently released a product which is 80% of the sustainable material, means bio-based or plant-based or recyclable or sustainable material consumed. I am not even going to talk about the cost of that because today it's still under development. But the point is that the moment you are done with this supply chain and you start working on a product which is, so to say, a little bit more dark green into the system, you develop another supply chain. And what do you do with that supply chain? Look at automobiles. We are talking about moving from fuel on ICE engines to battery. How green is the battery? Has everybody ever thought about it? I don't think if you look at in the total life cycle assessment analysis, the battery would look that green than versus other hydrogen or other stuff. Hydrogen cost, obviously. So supply chain is going to be the fundamental drive factor as to how do you take a decision on moving towards green product and setting up your current supply chain to at least start recognizing and analyzing that data back from them to move towards the lower possible emissions. That's the take today.
Sure. Yeah, and my current players, how can they actually support? In auto, when we are saying I am an tier 1 supplier providing ICE component, now suddenly my OEs are changing, right? They're saying batteries, EV, the entire system is different, right? So then how can I innovate? Where can I invest? And sometimes I may be a traditional manufacturing mechanical company, but suddenly electronic is important, software is important, chips are important. I think that transition we have to do jointly. So on the branding side, anyone, this is an open question. Yeah, if you want to come in, please. Please, you, and after that maybe.
So, growing up when we were doing our masters and MBA classes, the market acquisition was a key chapter, and how they will tell because India is a growing economy, people had limited purchasing power back then. So instead of the big Sunsilk bottle, they started doing pouches, right? And that is how they got to penetrate market in a much better fashion. A lot of products that are available out in the market, even from a consumable point of view, are just like bulk or a bigger size. Just let people understand the difference. There is a gap. I really want to buy green, but what is my spending capacity around it? And that is the gap that we need to bridge. So can we make it available in small packages, in testing, takeaways? But also then you want a sustainable organic growth. So there is a whole transition to the consumer behavior that you need to think of. So even with the automotive sector, and I have a background in that sector, is like, if I am buying just a family car, like a zip car for the city, it serves a very different purpose. I'm not trying to be flashy. I just need to get through my daily commute. And that's why I'm going after that particular car. But if I'm really buying a luxury car, or, can I really incorporate larger elements of the materials being green? Because if somebody is really buying a luxury car, they wouldn't mind shedding a few bucks. And that is the consumer behavior or the psychology of the consumer that you need to basically understand, and then position your products, design your products from that perspective.
Yeah, but I think the consumer doesn't want to pay. Why would I pay? I understand. So I am making an investment in bringing a green product to the market. I am a household. My income remains the same, irrespective of whether it's a green product or not. So I'm looking from that budget perspective. Now there's a delta to bringing the green product. Now that investment, we say, is towards the long term. And that burden then should the government subsidize, should the industry subsidize? Because when you bring it at parity from a price point perspective or below, then only adoption will happen, right? Because the mindset shift also today, if you see the startup world, let them get used to it. I will fund for it. Once they're used to it, then I will grow and I'll be profitable. So the same principle, I think, that's what I think.
Yeah, I'll add to this. I mean, while I'm not an operations person, of course, I've also worked the longest in automobiles. My first time in FMCG. Also an engineer. So I think the wiring is right there for sustainability. There are two aspects to this. A lot of companies, I think all of us here as well. One is to innovate and move towards sustainable product-wise, where then you decide how much premium you want to charge, how is it that your value chain can add to it, what is it that you can do in terms of cost. The other thing is to talk about the right things that you are doing so that the world also knows. I'm not saying you should definitely not towards greenwashing or, go towards the stuff where faking it out there. But there is value in talking about the good things. Like, say, let's start off with the simplest of things, right? In the ESG, in the social piece, there is this whole aspect of the CSR piece. Why do you think people many, many years ago started associating with the Tatas and said, I want to work for them, I want to buy their products? We think they're a good brand. It started off with, frankly, I can tell you, Tata cars are like trucks. Now they're much better. But in the past, they're like trucks. They're truck manufacturer. They would like car also, by the way, one of their engineers did it. But the fact that the brand had made a space in the hearts of the people was because of what they had done on ground. Okay. So that's where I'm saying your brand building storytelling needs to come in. And today also, when you talk about, because I think most of us who do ESG are also very shy about it. Otherwise, we're like, karna hai, it's calm. Hamare liye calm hai. Should we talk about it? नहीं, ये क्या है? ये PR story नहीं हो सकता है. But unless you bring out the stories, and doesn't necessarily have to be only CSR stories, but there's so much work that happens out there in your factories that can actually become motivational stories for people who want to come into the space, your value chain partners to start seeing value in it, and your consumer to say, you know what, if nothing, I want to be associated with this brand because I've seen some good work that they're doing around whatever. It could be around environment, it could be around social, or the fact that, the governance. A lot of us, all of us here, especially listed companies, we work on one report. And sometimes the debate is always like, kitne hi log padhte honge? We do it, but pata nahi. But I can tell you, as a listed company, when we do our AGMs, and I'm sure all of us here would have experienced this, a lot of your shareholders actually read it. They give you feedback. Exactly. So and that's where I'm saying is where the brand plays a role, because you need to make space in their mind, in their hearts, and in their pocket. Just one of them is not really going to help. So if you can make some space everywhere, and a balance of whatever 30% somewhere, 40% somewhere, 10% somewhere, but be in all places. Only then your business also will be sustainable, and the value that they associate with. And like I said, it's about I just want to be associated with the brand because I think they do the right things on this.
Yeah,
thing.
no,
I
and
think
I
that's
agree. Storytelling is very powerful. We all would have seen the Apple.
I didn't want to quote
so-
that because I mean I'm not too sure if that's the right way.
no, but I'm no, but I'm saying that the narrative has to be front and center. We should
In
not
fact,
shy.
I just wanted to add to like on a lighter note when he spoke about downstream. You need to look at what consumers are doing. You don't even need to wash your toothbrush. I mean, there are times when somebody say, okay, the person who's brushing, what light are they using? How much time are they in the bathroom? Are they leaving their tap? Is it our responsibility? Definitely no. But then if you want to go to that minutest of things,
Yeah.
you can. But of course, I think that responsibility should not be with,
No,
with the corporate
I
for
agree.
sure.
But the cost has to be captured. That's the principle. No, I think all these things will change, evolve. Different corporates look at it differently. Some of them are saying, let me have the right data, the relevant data. Let me include this in my qualification criteria. Many of them are working across the supply chain to build that differentiation, working with third partners who can bring in the technology to enable that. I think it will evolve. It's evolving already. In the last 2-3 years, we've seen so many changes. As of January, even Europe has started, and the CBAM is anyway an animal which is coming up. So the business efficiency part, the supply chain part, the incorporating this in the decision making is an ongoing journey. We have to look at the long term lens, make those investments. I think the cost of burden has to be shared. Definitely, I think the innovation part has to be driven. So these are some of the larger messages which I heard. I have enough time. Actually, don't have enough time really. But if there are any couple of questions, I'll take 2 questions.
Good afternoon to all the experts. I have a question to Colgate expert. My question is, you said you have developed a recyclable tube now,
A few years ago, yes.
few days ago. So when we talk the recycle means start to end. How we are monitoring it? If we have produced it, we have to recycle it, own this responsibility to recycle as well. So process, how you are developing the process to get it back to recycle. Like if you have produced that 100 tubes,
Correct.
yeah,
Are you getting it
100 million tubes, say for in the month of March, how these tubes are recycled or not, how you will monitor or what processes you are developing.
Yeah.
Because only producing recyclable, it doesn't mean ki it is a green, because somewhere it is going to thrown out in the earth and somewhere it is going to dumped by the user. So as a
Great
good
question.
citizen, as a responsible industries, we need to think for this also.
Yes.
So my question is this, that
How are we doing
only
that?
because we need not to only worried for what the cost involved there, but we have to inculcate to that level. So
So,
can you
I
clarify?
think great question. In fact, there are 2 aspects to it. One is to ensure that your products are recyclable, right? So our current portfolio in India, about 80% is already recyclable. By mid of next year or by end of this year, it will be 100% recyclable. Next is ensuring that we do collection on it. So our EPR collections for the year, which include toothpaste and beyond, is about 120%. Okay, so that's what we do. We are also working on seeing what products we could make with these tubes. We've not yet finalized on what it is. Once we do that, you'll soon hear back from us on that as well, because that's what we're trying to do. And also, the fact that I told you about, we work with schools, we're working with retailers, is to try and see how we could collect these back. So that's also a program that we're starting from children to retail units, as to saying how is it that we can collect back and see how much we can stop from going into the ocean or into the dump sites, because I think that's the biggest responsibility, whether it's for the clothing companies or for FMCG companies like us.
Great, that is appreciated. But I have one this suggestion to Colgate or
Yes.
whosoever is, if you are not able to collect it 100% or 99%. So can you do the research to develop the biodegradable tube rather than recyclable tube?
Ma'am, before you
Yeah,
answer,
no,
just a minute.
Yeah.
Sir has to leave, and we would request Hitesh to please hand over a memento to Mr. Surya Prakash. Can we please have a picture? Thank you very much, sir, for your time. Can we please come for have a group photograph as well, just before sir leaves? Thank you very much.
So maybe you can answer that question. And the other questions we can catch it offline if you don't mind. We are running out of time.
Thank you for the ideas. Appreciate it. Like I told you, we will let you know the stories on what we're doing on what it is. So you'll hear back from us. I think it was a great panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We are running a little bit behind schedule, and I'm sure all of you will agree that as we make the shift and we start thinking away from short-term gains towards long-term investment and sustainability, and we need to always keep our next generation in mind in every decision we made. And I think that was resonated very well by our panelists. And thank you, Hitesh, for kind of maneuvering the discussion quite well. And I would request Mr. Hitesh Sethi to please hand over the mementos to our esteemed panelists. And a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. I'm amazed with the kind of knowledge, information, and insights that our panelists have shared. And of course, they lead by example. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, our esteemed panelists. Thank you, Hitesh.